If you think your childhood was tough because your parents made you do piano lessons, imagine growing up in a society where your government expected you to wrestle, run naked, lift weights, and then eventually give birth to super soldiers, or be shamed for not producing quality. Today we're taking a deep dive into the brutal and bizarre treatment of women in Sparta, how they lived, how they were raised, the strange marriage rituals, the body inspections, the state-controlled reproductive system, and the jaw-dropping expectations placed on Spartan mothers. Welcome to Sparta, the ancient society that combined military obsession, questionable parenting, and a national breeding program into one big, sweaty, terrifying package. Grab your shield, because by the end of this video you'll either be grateful you weren't born in ancient Sparta, or you'll start questioning your gym commitment. Let's begin. To understand Spartan women, you need to understand Sparta itself, a society born from fear, war, and a desperate need for control. Around the 8th to 7th century BCE, Sparta wasn't just a city-state. It was the ancient Greek version of a boot camp crossed with a dictatorship. After conquering the region of Messenia, Spartans enslaved the population, calling them helots. These helots outnumbered Spartans massively. Some estimates say 7-1. So imagine you and 6 of your friends bullying one guy in class, except that guy is actually plotting to overthrow you every day. That was Sparta's reality. To prevent uprisings, Sparta became obsessed with discipline, strength, and producing elite soldiers. And who was responsible for making those soldiers? Women. Which meant their bodies weren't just their own. They were state property, strategically important like wheat fields or military barracks. Now before we continue, if you love these kinds of unbelievable history stories, I kindly invite you to hit that subscribe button, as I've got plenty more videos coming your way. And please tell me in the comments, if it was up to you, would you rather be a Spartan man or woman, and why? Spartan girls were raised completely differently from other Greek girls. In Athens, girls were expected to stay inside, weave, and ideally speak as little as possible, like they were being prepped to become shy background NPCs in Sparta. Nope. Spartan girls were basically put through a junior version of CrossFit. Their training included running, jumping, wrestling, discus, and javelin throwing strength training dance drills that were basically early-day HIIT workouts. And many of these were done naked because Spartans believed clothing restricted movement, and that nudity built confidence, discipline, and hardiness. Try explaining that to your PE teacher. Why the intense training? The Spartan state believed that strong women equals strong children. Women were literally trained like Olympic athletes for their future role. Childbirth. This is basically the equivalent of your parents forcing you to lift weights at age 8, so you could one day have superior babies. They weren't even subtle about it. Ancient commentators wrote that Spartan girls exercised so they would bear robust offspring. The government treated women less like individuals and more like biological military factories, not exactly a motivational poster. Unlike almost every other Greek city-state, Spartan women received formal education: reading, writing, singing, public speaking. You could argue Spartan women were among the most educated women in the entire ancient world. But here's the twist. They weren't educated for personal growth. They were educated to motivate men, raise warriors, shame cowards. Imagine your school report card reading. Susie speaks clearly, has excellent posture, and effectively intimidates adult men. A plus. This wasn't empowerment, when it was grooming for a specific social performance. But here's where things get dark. Sparta controlled reproduction with the same seriousness other states reserve for military defense. Everything, from exercise to marriage to who slept with whom, was viewed through the lens of producing elite soldiers. A few brutal realities. 1. The state-monitored marriage age. Women typically married around age 18, older than other Greeks, because Spartan officials believed women needed to be physically mature to birth stronger children. 2. Marriages were arranged. Romantic love? Ha ha ha! Cute. No. 3. Inspections of babies. Newborns were examined by elders. If the baby was weak, disabled, or judged unfit, they were taken to the mountainside and abandoned life and death, decided like a harsh school talent show. That baby's not strong enough. Next. 4. Sexual relationships could be reassigned. If a man wasn't producing healthy kids, the state might allow another man to sleep with his wife to improve the bloodline. That's basically ancient Greece saying, "Look, Tim, your stats aren't cutting it. were subbing in derrick. This wasn't about love or families, as it was eugenics with extra steps. Spartan marriage was so bizarre that even other Greeks were like, "What are you doing over there?" The ceremony began with kidnapping. Not violent kidnapping, symbolic kidnapping, but still weird. The groom would abduct the bride with her family's cooperation. Then things get stranger. The bride's hair was cut extremely short. She was dressed in men's clothing. She was placed on a bed in the dark. Then the groom would sneak in later that night. Yes, sneak. Even after they were married, he would visit secretly at night while still living in the barracks. Imagine marrying someone and then seeing them only during secret nighttime missions like they're a medieval Batman. This could go on for months or years. In some cases, couples didn't even live together full-time until the man turned 30. If your boyfriend only texts you at 2 a.m, congratulations, you're in a Spartan marriage. Spartan mothers were beside everything else expected to be emotionally bulletproof. No tears, no fear, no softness. Their honour was tied entirely to producing brave sons. The most famous Spartan saying, "Come back with your shield, or on it." Meaning, return victorious or return dead, but don't you dare retreat telling your kid to die rather than run away. That's not parenting. That's a motivational speech written by a supervillain. If your mum ever shouted at you for getting bad grades, imagine her saying, "You dishonour this family, return to school with an A," or don't return at all. Spartan women were expected to display zero emotion even if all their sons died in battle. There are historical accounts of mothers celebrating their sons' heroic deaths like they won a trophy. It's the ancient equivalent of saying, "Oh, my son died. Good. At least he didn't embarrass me." This culture was hardcore to the point of psychological horror. On the surface, Spartan women seemed like they had it good. They owned land, they were educated, they were physically strong, and they weren't forced into domestic confinement like Athenian women. So it's easy to fall into the trap of saying, "Wow, Sparta was actually feminist before feminism existed." But that's like looking at a prison with a nice garden and saying, well, at least the landscaping's cute. Because underneath the muscle, the wealth, and the razor-sharp one-liners, Spartan women lived inside a system built entirely around control, physical, emotional, and reproductive. Let's peel the armour back. 1. Their bodies were not their own. Every part of a Spartan woman's life was tied to producing future soldiers. Everything. Their diet, designed for fertility. Their exercise, designed for durability. Their marriage age, chosen for peak biological efficiency. If modern governments behaved like this, you'd wake up to a letter saying, "Dear citizen, your reproductive potential has been analysed. Please report to Gymnasium B for state-mandated squats." Spartan women weren't encouraged to work out for health or empowerment. They were trained like livestock bred for national benefit. 2. Emotional control was mandatory. Spartan women were required, not encouraged, required, to suppress vulnerability. Crying over a dead child, shamed, reacting with grief instead of patriotic pride, unacceptable. There's a story of a Spartan mother who was told all 5 of her sons died in battle. Instead of collapsing, she asked, "But did we win?" When she heard Sparta was victorious, she reportedly walked away satisfied. To be clear, that's not strength. That is emotional suppression industrialized by the state. It's basically like if your mum told you, "You crashed the family car. As long as you cut off the other driver's escape route, I'm proud of you." 3 honor culture turned them into enforcers of masculinity. Spartan women had a terrifying amount of social dominance, not for themselves but as instruments of the system. If a man showed fear, weakness, or anxiety, women were expected to publicly shame him. We're talking aggressive, community-wide roasting. No filters, no HR department, just full-on public humiliation. Imagine a man having a panic attack and a group of Spartan mums yelling, "Grow up, even our 12-year-olds fight wolves." Women became a psychological police force, not because they chose to, but because the state weaponized their voices. 4. Their identity was reduced to their sons. A woman's worth was measured by how many sons she produced, how brave those sons were, whether they died the correct way. No sons, you were pitied, or worse, mocked. Cowardly sons, you were socially radioactive. Spartan men might have been soldiers, but Spartan women? They were the quality control department for human beings. This wasn't empowerment, it was militarized motherhood. 5. Even their power wasn't really power. Sure, women controlled a ton of property, but only because men died. Men lived in barracks. Men left everything behind during war campaigns. The economy couldn't function without women managing estates. It wasn't empowerment, it was necessity. If you're the only person left in the room when someone spills coffee, you're not the boss. You're the cleanup crew. Same energy. Now let's talk about one of the most uniquely bizarre aspects of Spartan life, the social role of women as public enforcers of courage, discipline, and Spartan values. Because if you thought the Spartan government was controlling, wait until you meet Spartan women acting as the state's motivational speakers, and sometimes it's attack dogs. Spartan women were expected to be loud. Very loud. In a world where most Greek women were told, "Shh, don't speak," Spartan women were basically handed a megaphone and told, "Yell at everyone until they toughen up." They were outspoken, bold, and brutally honest. Other Greeks were horrified. Athenian men would say things like, "Spartan women run their husbands," which is hilarious because Spartan women didn't run the household, they ran the mood of the entire city. They were the ancient world's original hype beasts mixed with drill sergeants. Public shaming wasn't optional, it was patriotic. If a man behaved in a way that wasn't Spartan enough, women were expected to shame, mock, and correct him. Examples include calling out cowards, mocking men who returned without their shields, insulting hesitant warriors, praising bravery while scorning weakness. Imagine walking home after a bad day and a random Spartan woman shouts, "Nice posture, coward. Even your shadow is afraid of battle." They enforced social rules through ritualized mockery. At festivals, groups of young women performed songs and chants praising heroic men and ridiculing unworthy ones. Imagine a choir dedicated solely to roasting the men in your community, live in front of friends and family. The purpose? Shaming men into courage through public embarrassment. This is the ancient equivalent of having your worst moments turned into a viral TikTok you can never delete. Women oversaw discipline in the household, but without privacy they supervised children, helots, and domestic life. But not because they were trusted with personal authority. It was because the state required domestic discipline to reflect military discipline. There was no concept of home is where you relax. The Spartan home was an extension of the army. If the barracks were boot camp, the household was day camp, and Spartan mothers were the camp counselors who kept everyone in line. Their boldness was praised only when it served the system. If a woman spoke boldly to shame a coward, good, approved. If she spoke boldly against the state or its norms, absolutely not, dangerous, intolerable. Their freedom of speech was conditional, a controlled burn, not a wildfire. It's like being told, you can say whatever you want as long as it's exactly what we want you to say. They were symbols of Spartan superiority. Spartan women were intentionally portrayed as strong, fearless, outspoken, and physically commanding, because it made Sparta look powerful. They were propaganda, ambassadors of intimidation, walking, talking reminders to other Greeks that, if our women are this tough, imagine our men. Their confidence wasn't just culture, it was strategy. However, they still couldn't. Vote, make political decisions, choose husbands freely, control their reproductive life, challenge the militaristic system, and avoid being judged by the performance of their sons. Their social power was a mask the system used to hide its control. It's like giving someone a sword for show, but chaining their feet so they can't actually go anywhere. You could say Spartan women lived inside a script written by the city long before they were born. They weren't encouraged to ask who they wanted to be. That question didn't exist. Even in private, they were expected to be as unbreakable as the warriors they raised. A Spartan mother crying alone in her house would have been seen as a moral failure, not a natural human reaction. Wealth didn't bring them freedom either. Sparta hated luxury so fiercely that even rich women couldn't spend their wealth on anything enjoyable. No jewellery, no fine clothes, no extravagant feasts. Their estates made them powerful on paper, but in practice that power was just another job. Assets to maintain, not pleasures to enjoy. And despite running the home front while men lived in the barracks, women had almost no emotional support. Sparta didn't encourage warm friendships or soft bonds. Even among women, relationships were built on shared duty, not shared feelings. Imagine managing a household, raising children to be fearless warriors, supervising slaves, enduring constant judgment, and doing it all without a single socially acceptable moment of vulnerability. The hardest truth is that Spartan women had no way out. They couldn't leave the system, couldn't choose a different life, couldn't marry outside the rigid framework, and couldn't decide not to have children. Their influence was real, but it came with chains attached. They were pillars holding up the Spartan state, admired for their strength, but rooted painfully in place. Their lives weren't defined by loud oppression, but by quiet confinement. Not bars of iron, but bars made of expectations, roles, and a society that needed them strong, yet never let them be free. To conclude, we could say they were the backbone of Sparta, the silent engine behind its warriors, its culture, and its legend. But behind all the tough sayings, the athletic feats, and the sharp tongues was a system that saw women not as people, but as tools for national survival. If you enjoyed this deep dive, leave a like, hit subscribe, and let me know what would you want to see next. Because history, it gets way weirder than you think.